So I will talk today about what we are calling the desert kites. These gigantic structures that were firstly discovered by pilots, British and French pilots, flying over Syria and Jordan, and seeing these kind of structures on the ground that were still visible, and they decided to call it kites from the desert because they, in their mind, were looking like children kites from Europe. So how it looks like? It's basically very long convergent lines of stones that can be from several hundred meters to several kilometers, and they lead to an enclosure that is usually extremely large, with an average size of 1 hectare. All around this enclosure, you can see all these little rooms that we are calling first now cells, and they are very often in a very complex topography, and you do not feel inside like you are inside a closed structure. So it's to say that these structures are really visible from the sky. You can't really realize where you are when you are on the ground, so we use actual flying kites to we put a camera on them, and we can make pictures that we do very well now with drones nowadays. So you can see the sometimes very complex aspect of these structures. And to give you an idea of the scale, you have our camp with our tents and cars in the corner of this picture. Here another idea of the kite really from above, and you can see the cars on the top right of the picture to give you the scale. What you see on the ground is something very discrete, something that it's not really understandable, with some lines of stones, sometimes proper walls. You can see that they lead to some circular structures, but it's not very clear. So we started a project, firstly based in France, but now with many international collaborations that we called Global Kites, to try to understand from the high-resolution satellite imagery. And at the very beginning of our project, we had an estimation of the number of kites that was a few hundreds only. So just before we started the project in about 10, 15 years ago. Now, from 2010, 2011, 2012, the access to satellite imagery is started to be extremely easy with Google Earth and other types of free access platforms. And it was then possible to make a much bigger inventory than we thought. So from a few hundreds, we now know more than 6,600, almost 7,000 kites of a very huge distribution area from central, western parts of the Arabian Peninsula to Jordan, Syria, Armenia, and Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. So the size and shapes are very different, from very simple ones, as you can see here, with just 2 convergent walls and an enclosure, to very complex shapes, sometimes with some reutilization, reuse, or there's also a very strong diversity in the number of these tiny rooms around the enclosure. So you can see on the left a kite with just one of these seals, and on the right a kite with more than 30 of them. So we wanted to know, to try to answer 3 main questions. What were they for? What were their function? So when the first pilots were seeing them from the sky, they were saying maybe it's their fortresses, maybe they are domestic structures, there are castles, forts, irrigation systems. Maybe they were used to animals, and that's what people were thinking more and more, that there were a link with animals. So were they for domestic animals to gather them in huge enclosures, or maybe they were used to hunt them? When were they made, and when were they used? So how old were they? And our third question was how to explain such a wide geographic distribution. So I invite you to have a look at our website, globalkites.fr, where you can see all this distribution. We started to study 5 different zones, and we actually went to each of them to make excavations. So the first one in the Østert Plateau in Kazakhstan, then in this region where it's a bit isolated from other very dense zones, which is in Armenia, in the Mount Aragats, and the third zone, which I will speak about today, which is the Harat al-Sham in northeastern Jordan, as well as the northern Nefud region in Saudi Arabia, and another region of Jordan in the southeast called the Jibal al-Khashabiyya, and more recently in Khaybar, in the southern expansion of the kite distribution. So in northeastern Jordan, in Harat al-Sham, we've been excavating and discussing and exploring a very large zone, about 120 kilometers in long and 50 kilometers in wide, with a very, very dense number of kites. The funny thing is that they are all oriented, they all have the same orientation, so they are all open to the east, and they are forming real chains, like making real barriers, real walls, for most probably maybe linked to movement of animals. To give you an example here about one of these kites we've been exploring and excavating, here just at the bottom of the image in the red cycle you can see 2 people, 2 archaeologists who are actually working in this cell. So we didn't know what they were and what we could find in them, and actually we discovered a very deep hole, a very deep pit, that were at the end this hunting device, the trapping aspect of the kites, and that's what we found in every cells that we've been excavating all around these enclosures, sometimes being extremely deep, to up to 2 meters and 2.5 meters, almost 3 meters in Armenia. And you can see they are not just simple holes in the ground, because they are all being walled in their periphery. Exactly the same as we found in Armenia, in Saudi Arabia, in several regions, and in Kazakhstan as well. So these structures were most probably and definitely traps. And how was this working? Working now. Okay. We think that well, there's a video, but it doesn't work. We estimate that these animals, in this case gazelles, would follow these very long lines, and because they are naturally following a straight line in the landscape. Once they enter inside the enclosure, they would this line of stones all around this enclosure, and they would fall into these very deep pit traps. In another region of Jordan, in the southeast, close to the border of Saudi Arabia, you can see in this red square just a group of 10 kites that are very isolated from the main density of kites. And these 10 kites are aligned along the mountain of the plateau escarpment. These kites are very typical to this region. Just the 10 of them have this very, very long corridor with the wide opening on the plateau and this curved entrance. And that's important for the following of this presentation, because this curved corridor leads to the enclosure, and once again, what you can see before excavation is not very convincing, and sometimes we were not very sure that what we could find would be actually, again, these very deep pits. When we reconstruct the height of these pits, is that they are now being 1.70 meters deep, but they were much more deep with the wall that were up these pits. Close to each of these 10 kites, there is one site. So we found 10 sites close to the 10 kites, having extremely large amount of stone tools and remains of architectural remains, most probably domestic structures. We excavated some of them, and in one of them we found this stone that was depicting a kite. And that was depicting a kite that is very typical to the region, with this curved corridor, as I was saying, with the example of the real kite. You can see all these pit traps that are all around and very well engraved in this drawing, and this curved also corridor with the depiction of a symbol, maybe a topographic symbol, maybe one of the very first in human history, because that's the place where you have a slope break just before the curvation of this corridor. So it's also very interesting to see that it's probably one of the oldest plans to scale of such a mega structure that once again is only visible from the air. So it was most probably drawn and engraved by the people who invented them and had their plans in the mind. One of the sites that we've been excavating close to these kites had also an enormous amount of gazelle bones, wild species of gazelle, on its surface. And after excavation, we realized that there were almost more bones and more stone tools than sand when we excavated this huge site that is related to a small village, and that is very well dated. So that's a dating table, and you can see in the red part, it's all dated to 7000 BC. So including the kites themselves, this habitation site, and also the engraving. So all this occupation of these little houses and this little village was a village for and from and by the kite users. There are some very typical stone tools also related to them that are most probably linked to a hunting activity. And also when we study the useware of the tools, we can see that most of them were used to hide work, to work the animal skins, and most probably the gazelle skins. Another example is the region of North Nafud in Saudi Arabia, and where we found between two couple of kites. You can see on this image, you have two kites that are couple of twins kites, and just in between we found this engraving again representing a couple of kites. And again, this type of kite is also very similar to the neighboring kites that are close to it. And there are also plans to scale just the one like the one we saw in Southeast Arabia. And then we opened another 6 window to this research with the Khaybar Longue Durée Project, co-directed with Dr. Munira here and our colleague Guillaume. These kites in the Khaybar region are quite famous because they are very specific to this region. Some of them are looking like very different kind of shapes, more like trousers or spaceships, and some other are very different, much more rough, much more simple also, and also much more eroded. So we could date more or less these classical Khaybar kites to the Bronze Age, but these ones would be more ancient, and we excavated many of them, and we could date them. It's still in the process of having the last results. In one of these not so classical kites, that's this one you can see on the right. That looks like more of an ancient one, and close to it we found this site that we called Al-Mathana, and we opened several soundings to try to date it and to understand it. Why we called it Al-Mathana? Because we found so many groundstone tools and so many stone tools, thousands and thousands from the surface. So when we opened the site with the tiny soundings, we could find the hearth, we could find a lot of faunal remains, including very large seashells, and we could date the site to 7000 BC, so exactly the same date as these kites and these habitation sites that we found in southeast Jordan. So that was very exciting, also because we found so many typical material culture, including stone tools and animal bone tools, and the faunal remains are extremely important and diverse, with the main ones that this is a study made by Hervé, and the main animals are actually wild species. So that's pretty uncommon for the Neolithic period, 7000 BC, and most of them are half gazelle, half equids. Equids being most probably wild ass, wild donkey. There are just some few examples of sheep and goats, and maybe also cattle. There are some very exotic species like deers that are definitely not coming from there, and also a few hares. There are also some fish, including the parrotfish and the seashells, all coming most probably from the Red Sea, which is not so close. And the ostrich is also represented by eggshells, and the oldest and first presence of leopard, of Arabian leopard. There's also one of the oldest representation of art, of mobile art, which is a head of an animal, and looking like most probably an equid. So is it a horse, is it a donkey? That's something that we're working on. Close to it there is also a lot of rock art, which is most probably a Neolithic, and we will hear a lot about rock art during this conference. So here's just some depiction of bovines, they aurochs, so wild cow, or are they domesticated cow? That's also an open question. So to go back to the kites, now the function of them when we're trying to answer our three questions, they are definitely made to hide and hunt, to hunt and trap the gazelles, sometimes with rams. So which hunted species? So in Arabia, it's mostly gazelles. You can see on the right, but also in Kazakhstan, on top left, it would be more the Saiga antelope, and also in the bottom left, the wild ass, the Emion in Armenia. That's most probably the case, and maybe as we saw in Khaybar on this habitation site, could be also wild ass in that place. Very little bone remains are usually found in the kites. Of course, it's normal because when they were doing their hunting and trapping, they were always collecting the bones, so never leaving them. But we have very rare examples with here an example of 6 or 7 individuals of gazelles being forgotten by the hunters and trappers. This concept of trapping is something quite well known, and is also was still in use in Bahrain, in Qatar, in Kuwait, not so long ago with the fish traps that you all know very well here. The dating, so they are dating from the Neolithic onward, so you can see on this graph that the oldest one are from the 7000 BC, the Neolithic period, and then you go to northern Saudi Arabia, to Armenia, to all the different, the more you go far from southeast Jordan, and the more recent you have, until the medieval period in Kazakhstan. And to finish with this question about the distribution, why there is such a wide distribution, it's most probably due to diffusion of this concept of trapping from one place to another through time. We also have some computer modeling of how these traps could work, and maybe also we are trying to add also this possibility that dogs would have been very useful for trappers to invite the gazelles to come and die in their traps. So to conclude, we have many new questions, of course, related to the idea of the occupation and the control of the territory. Also the impact of these traps to first the landscape, because you saw that there were real barriers, and that's one of the first examples in human history of having such an impact on the landscape first, and also on the ecology, as maybe this mass trapping, this mass hunting could have led to extinction of some of the species. So also, who are they? Now we're starting to have new dwelling sites, and we're studying them still, and there is much more to be discovered.